Forever Friend Without the Fur by BelleAmant. Read by Satori. Summary. When Izuku Midoriya was 4, he was diagnosed as quirkless. When he was 5, he was ostracized and isolated for the declaration of the previous year. Perhaps this is why, when Izuku Midoriya turned 6, Inko Midoriya decided to let the boy have a pet. And Izuku, being Izuku, promptly chose a snake. When Izuku Midoriya was 4, he was diagnosed as quirkless. When he was 5, he was ostracized and isolated for the declaration of the previous year. And so when Izuku Midoriya was 6, he was friendless, forgotten. He had no one to talk to, and so he talked to himself. He had no one to play with, and so he sat on the side, scribbling endlessly in his notebooks, always working, trying to get ahead in a way that others would mock as useless, because they mocked the boy, too, as useless. Perhaps this is why, when Izuku Midoriya turned 6, Inko Midoriya decided to let the boy have a pet. It will be a huge responsibility, Inko warned her child. A pet is a life, Izuku. It's not a toy that you can just abandon. You have to take care of it every day. Izuku understood. Of course he understood. Izuku was a bright kid, smart. He knew that animals were alive. All creatures were, after all. And so Izuku agreed, promised, with all of his heart, on his love of heroes, that he would care for whichever pet he ended up with until the very end. Because Izuku did not even have to think over whether or not he wanted a pet. He did, he most certainly did. Because a pet is a companion, first and foremost, and the responsibility would be worth the loneliness. Would likely even make it easier to ignore the isolation, being too busy to notice. Schoolwork and hero notes could only take up so much time after all, could only keep his mind from wandering for so many hours a day, and playing heroes and villains on his own grew dull, routine. He could always predict his own moves after all, and that quickly took the joy out of it all. Yes, a pet would certainly be good for Izuku. And so Izuku agreed, and his mother, content with the knowledge that her son understood the seriousness of caring for a living creature, took him to the pet store that very day. There were quite a few creatures at that store. Anything from kittens to birds, from hamsters to lizards. Few animals were not there, the only ones missing being those who needed more space. There were quite a few creatures, many eager to be handled, to be held, and taken home, the future pet well socialized by the workers and ready to be given attention. But it was not the furry animals, the ones with cute noises and endless energy that Izuku fell in love with. No, it was a snake. It was a snake, just a baby, something small and almost noodle-like, pure black with wide eyes peering up at him. It was just a snake, still tiny enough to fit in his hands, and with the help of an employee, that is exactly where it ended up, slithering around in his gapped palms for only a moment before laying still, calm. And it was the snake that Izuku wanted to keep. And so Izuku turned to the employee and asked for help gathering the right materials. "Are you sure, ma'am?" the worker asked. "It's a rather expensive setup. Corn snakes grow up to 5 feet, and their feeding will only be more expensive as they grow. Perhaps your son would like something smaller to start with, like a hamster?" "I'm a lawyer," Inko dismissed. "Money is not my concern. My son's happiness is." I understand," the worker stuttered. "But I would like to point out that snakes do live for quite some time. If this is your son's first pet, he may not be ready for such a long-term responsibility. Are you sure?" "My son understands," Inko assured. "He's likely ecstatic over the longevity, if I'm being quite honest." And she was right. Izuku had never been a fan of losing those he cared about, after all. And he had already lost his fathers and friends due to his quirklessness. It only made sense that he would choose a companion that would stick around for decades. And so it was the corn snake that Izuku chose, something black as the night and content to sit in Izuku's hands, pleased by the heaters, a little piece of void that the boy could whisper his thoughts to, gone forever after their admittance. Yes, it was the corn snake that Izuku chose, and the corn snake that Izuku raised. And it was the corn snake that saw Izuku go and grow throughout the years. It was the snake that saw him at 7, saddened by the way his peers would throw out his homework. It was the snake that saw him at 8, crying over the way his peers scribbled insults on his desk. It was the snake who saw him at 9, cleaning blood off of his feet after his peers put tags in his shoes, tags the boy had not seen but only felt, far too late. It was the snake that saw him at 10, as the boy poured his heart into academics, into heroics, into being the best he could be. It was the snake that saw him at 11, trying to make his own workout routine, barred from gyms due to his quirkless status, and left to flounder on his own. It was the snake that saw him at 12, breaking down and building himself up. It was the snake who saw him at 13, where he would not smile until he saw his pet, his companion, who had spent the last 7 years by his side, longer than anyone or anything except his own mother. It was the snake who saw him at 14, who heard the story of All Might, of Bakugo, of rooftops, and sludge villains, and a quirk that could be passed on. It was the snake who learned the origin first, the snake who heard the methods, details of training plans and eating guides, who heard of rusty fridges and broken appliances left on a beach. It was the snake who heard of 10 months of intensive workout, of a hair swallowed and limbs shattered. It was the snake who was there throughout it all, not a person, but a pet. And Izuku treasured his snake dearly, treasured it most of all, more than any other gift, any other event in his life, because yes, One for All was a beautiful gift, a chance to finally make his dreams come true, but his snake was there long before, and did not require that the boy have a quirk to stay in Izuku's life. And so Izuku always held his snake in favor of all else, even as One for All became his own, before something usable thanks to full cowling, something powerful and something great. One for All never surpassed his reptilian companion. So when the dorms were implemented, it was no wonder that his snake came along. It took one conversation with his mother for his snake to be registered as an emotional support animal, because that was, quite honestly, what his snake had become, a companion who supported him throughout the years, even when no one else could. And just like that, the snake could come with. This is approved, so long as Izuku never mistreated it, caged it in a home too small, and never let it out. As if Izuku could bear to do such a thing to the only companion that has stayed around. And Izuku felt a little bit better about the whole moving into a new place idea. He just forgot one little detail. The fact that he had not warned a single person about his companion. If Izuku were to be honest after the fact, he would admit that he had completely forgotten how unused to snakes many people are. Izuku had never been startled by reptiles, only fascinated, much as he was fascinated by the rest of the world, from quirks to creatures living in the wild. But Izuku was quirkless and different, and perhaps he should have realized that he had a bias towards the limbless critter. And Izuku had gotten his pet when it was only a baby, perhaps 7 inches long and thin as a pencil. For the class of 1A, Izuku's snake was 9 years old and 5 feet long, the longest a corn snake was known to be, an expanse of night sky draped around his shoulders and wound around his neck, not unlike Aizawa's capture weapon. It certainly did not help that Izuku was the last to arrive, that very first move-in day. His snake has been angsty, the stress of leaving no doubt getting to his companion, and Izuku had to make sure that his pet was comfortable before he could make the trip over, a walk that the snake enjoyed far more than it had the sight of his habitat being taken away, sent to UA a day in advance. His snake liked its tang, its own little home, even if it preferred to be out and about, with heat lamps set up around Izuku's room just for its convenience, the disappearance of the spot that only it could use. Izuku was not surprised that his friend was writhing around, angry and displeased. But his snake, while gentle, was always rather dramatic. If Izuku had the chance to say it, all hiss and no bite, docile, yet willing to throw a tantrum when upset by something. And so when Izuku arrived on campus, his teacher and his peers were all waiting for him, all turning and saying when he announced his arrival, "Problem child, you're..." Aizawa stopped, then blinked. "You're wearing a snake." It looks mad, Kaminari whispered, and the snake hissed. Oh, they are, Izuku agreed, and Kaminari paled when his snake shifted, bringing itself closer to Izuku. And Izuku knew they were only looking for heat, basking in the sun and the warmth that Izuku gave off. His spears did not. Holy fuck, Sarah shouted. Midoriya, that thing is trying to kill you. Someone get it off of him, Ashido yelped. Snakes are scary, Hagakure responded. Ojiro, you do it. I'd rather not, Ojiro admitted. Kirishima, I'm not manly enough, Kirishima cried out, and Bakugo snarled. Mountain has a fucking animal quirk, Bakugo shouted, and Izuku watched his peers all whirl around, turning to Koda. Save him, Uraka pleaded, and Koda blinked, staring down at them, before looking up to Izuku. Izuku, who was perfectly calm. I'm not in danger, Izuku said easily, and Koda breathed a sigh of relief. This is my pet. Your pet, Aizawa said. I wasn't aware that you were bringing a pet. Neto approved, Izuku responded. But it's my emotional support snake. Of course they are. A sigh. And then, whatever. Just go unpack. And so life was good. Izuku moving into the dorms, Void on his neck. And if Void started coming with him to class, pleased to stay wrapped around their owner, well, Aizawa didn't say a word. Izuku would later learn that it was because Nezu forced him to, in part due to his preference for animals over people, another part because Izuku looked like he was trying to mimic his teacher whenever Void wrapped around his neck. He'd be grateful. Embarrassed, but grateful. And just like that, life was never lonely. So that was Furever Friend Without the Fur by BelleAmant. I hope you enjoyed. I think that this will be my first ever upload. And I hope that there will be many more. So, yeah. Bye-bye for now. And see you next time.